Yeah, I would have been here earlier, but I got everything set up. Yeah, hang on. Would have been in here earlier, but I got everything set up, got everything in place. Then promptly my digestive system said, "Oh no, we're going to go crazy. Hey, thanks for that, dude. Whew. Holy cow." Or I should say, holy crap. That was a hell of a thing. All right, so I don't know why it's particularly angry with me today, but generally speaking, that's a give it an hour and recuperate. But it's been about 4 or 5 minutes, so it's still a little sensitive. All right, so where was I? Yeah, my brain's a little off right now because I just had what most people would consider food poisoning. Okay, so I've been goofing around with some stuff today. Board game designs. Did I post that information in here? No. So that's a different folder that I have. So where was that posted? No. We should go documents. Nope. Things to love. No. Miscellaneous? No, that doesn't seem right either. Where did I put that? I need to sort my stuff better than this. I think this is it. Dice Heroes. All right. Yep. So the first top half of that document is potential recipes to be cooking. Yeah. I need to sort my stuff better than that. I need to do way better than that. It's just one of those things where I have a document open and I'm filling out the document and I have an idea for a different project and I'm like, I should write this down before I lose that information. So I write it down and now all my documents are like 5 different things in the wrong place. So I need to do better about sorting that stuff out. Every week I should go through all of that stuff and pick out pieces and sort them into the correct file for them. I can't believe I am so bad at keeping them orderly like that. And then to hunt down all the pieces again. So where were we? We had digestive system's just really angry. It's really, really angry right now. I'm trying to think, what did I do differently today? And I think the only thing I can think of is like I went too long without eating, which can set me off sometimes. And then I had I ate a thing of tuna salad that I made. Can of tuna with some mayo and some crackers. And I think it's probably going too long without eating, but it's also possible that it's too much fat in one go. We'll find out. We'll see how the next day or two goes. But anyway, so I have a set of dice that I had for a while. I knew I had some around somewhere, and I found them. Didn't pull them out yet, but this for playtesting would be one of the things I can do to start. I do have, let's see if I got it here. I believe I still have it here. On occasion, I get together with some people and do some gaming. And part of that gaming is the now standard tabletop gamers set of polyhedronal dice. So 8-sided. My favorite, the 4-sided. Standard 6-sided. And 10. A 10 with marked off in 10s. A 12-sided and a 20-sided die. Now, for most of what I'm working on right here, I feel like we're going to stick with the standard D6. And so between These have 6 of them. Now, as I was talking about yesterday, the game that I'm playing with right now, as near as I can figure out what I want to do just yet, is either going to have 10 defense and 10 offensive dice per player, or 6. And so I have 5 here, and that's 6, or 12, and it makes 6. But if I do 6 defensive and 6 offensive dice, that'll be the 12 or 10 of dice that each player should use. So for my baseline testing and exploring, I think that'll be enough dice. I do think somewhere I have another set of like 25 dice, because my mother was a teacher and she used to get access for teaching small kids. You could go to a site called Oriental Trading, and it's sort of like it's almost all stuff that's like party packs. So if you go into like the Walmart, and in the party section, they have these packets of like 7 kazoos and 8 tops and all those little things that you can play with as party favors. Well, there's a company that produces things like that, and you can buy them in lots of 12 to 24 for teachers. And so they do that stuff sometimes. But as a resource for getting bulk, simple components to play with, so if you were to build a board game and you were looking at doing like a kitten themed board game or something like that. I don't know if anybody's ever thought to do that, but if you're doing a board game with a theme like kittens, I'd almost guarantee you that they have packs of 24 kitten rubber erasers that you could use. And so you could use them all as for player pieces for the game, and they're likely to come in different colors. So like it's a good resource for little things like that to tinker with. And I think I ordered a pack at one point of dice, and I want to say, was it 24? It may have been more than that. I seem to recall there were 3 rows that were double rows, so row, 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 and each one had 2 dice stacks that had to be 8 to 12 dice long at least, probably somewhere in the range of 10, so 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, it might have been 50 dice, might be more than that. I seem to remember there just being an absolute crazy number of dice in that packet, and I may have donated that to other people at some point, but if I still have it somewhere, it's probably sitting in storage. But those would be good for exploring gameplay and dabbling, and I should keep them around more, but my life's in a shambles. What can I say? So I've got these dice to do some play testing, and so what I've roughly worked out here is it's got some similarities to some of the dice mechanics I was going to use for the board game. The Ray Gun Gothic board game, where you have categories of action. In the Ray Gun Gothic board game, it was a matter of confronting an opponent and using, I'm trying to remember, I think it was 5 abilities. So you had fisticuffs, ranged attacks. So fisticuffs, ranged attacks, sci-fi technology, shield, and jumping, or something to that effect. And those were your 5 types of attack, and your dice might have paired sets. So you might have one fisticuffs and one jumping on a die face, so that when you roll that, so it got a little more complicated with some of that, but this one's going to be a little more simple. I'm going with the sets of those types of action, but oh come on, my digestive system's really angry right now. Let's not pick fights with it, please. So we're looking at 2 types of dice, and each die will have 6 faces. So you will have, again, essentially melee, fisticuffs, I guess, again, we'll call it, and then ranged attacks. Instead of spells or a science fiction thing, it would be a superpower. And then 3 sides would be things like the skull and crossbones and the healing or a regeneration die face and a gadget face. And those are the offensive faces. And then the defensive would be block, deflect, dodge, swipe. I have it written here as yoink. And then utility belt and a kind of re-roll a die. So basically, I'm going to have 2 types of dice. Now, I can play both sets with this because I just have to make a chart off to the side for each one. So like an offensive and a defensive chart that says a 6 will be a block on defensive, but a punch on offensive. And then I got to make some tokens for gadgets. And the gadgets are going to be things that have I'm not sure if I'm going to make a set that's dual usable. So if you have a bunch of gadgets, you have the option of using them offensively or defensively, or if I want to make a set of gadgets that are offensive and a set of gadgets that are defensive. I kind of like the idea of having offensive and defensive specific gadgets rather than having like, here's this mystical belt or whatever that could either block or hit somebody. Like I don't want to do that. Like I'm sure you could do something like the Green Lantern's ring. Like it can be a shield or it can be a fist that punches somebody from the air. And it's like I don't want to double them up like that. I mean, maybe I'll do 1 or 2 objects. Man, my feet are falling asleep. 1 or 2 objects. Did you lose me? No. That has multiple capabilities, but overall, I think I want them to be individual items because I think I was talking last night about Dragon Quest, my favorite video game when I was younger, where you got this big chart full of all the mystical items. And so instead of doing a gadget that pulls double duty and printing out 4 of the same one, I would much rather have 8 different items and then do something for each of the 4 categories of main ability, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, is that right? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that would be 10 types of gadgets. And that wouldn't be something you would do on a die. That would be tokens, I think. And then I need to figure out what to do for character dice, or not dice, character cards and mission cards. And that's really sort of like building that story element that I need to work on. Because I do want it to be possible to be modular, yes. But I think I've got all the components I need to figured out here. So we've got a player's offensive capabilities, defensive capabilities, gadgets or tools that they can use, the fact that they're going to be characters that you keep track of and they have a special ability, and then mission cards that they can do as a modular set. So some will be competitive, and I have a list of the different types where like co-op, dungeon, clear, collector, race, attack and defend, control, escort, etc., etc. If I do 2 or 3 or even 4 of each type, you're going to have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 gameplay types. So you could have 40 missions that you could do. If I do 8 characters to start with as a starter deck, you can choose which character you play. You can choose whether or not you cooperatively play with other members. And because the mission cards will be modular, you could do them as the story sequence, or you could do, I don't know that I would do 40. I think in any one given gameplay, 10 mission cards would be a good starter set. You can move them around in different orders. Most games that you'll play as a group of people are likely to only have 3 rounds, 3 to 5 rounds at most, if you're looking for a longer game with friends. So I feel like 10 mission cards would get you many different ways to do that. So basically you could do 1 through 5, you could do even numbered cards, you could do odd numbered cards, you could do sets of 2, skipping sets of 2. You could do them in any arrangement of, and put them together in any which way you want to do that. And you can get a number of replayability games going with solo play, competitive play, cooperative group play. So the replayability of that base set sounds like it's got a lot of opportunity there. So now it really comes down to figuring out the names and abilities of characters, missions, and gadgets. And I've got the sort of factions that people could belong to, but I got to build the world story for it. And so it's sort of like, this is the world, these are the factions in the world, these are the characters and what factions they belong to and what abilities they have. Here are some of the gadgets that you can have, and these are the missions that you're going to go on. And then the offensive and defensive capabilities of the dice are affected by the mission type and what kind of play you get. So if I were to do, I mean, I guess there are 10 types of missions. Would I do a complete set of 1 of each type? Maybe. And then make like an expansion pack with more heroes and another 10 set of mission types. And I mean, I think that pretty much grows the game relatively easily at that point. I might do additional gadget packs too. So, like, expansion packs are pretty predominantly going to be gadgets, characters, and mission types. And it's not a collectible dice game. I think once you get the base set of dice, you can play all the expansions with the base set of dice after that. I don't imagine that I would ever come up with additions for dice. I don't know what else I would have to add dice wise. If I added anything, it would add rules. So, like adding a die that allows you to have like a meteor strike. It's like I can't even imagine what an extra dice would be needed for in this game. Like once you have an offensive set and a defensive set, they should be able to be used for every hero. And yeah, you don't need any more dice after that unless I do like unless at some point you get to a point where gameplay becomes repetitive enough that you would like to go to like a power level jump. So like say upgrade your hero to legend status, and at that point it becomes you get 15 dice to choose from, so it's seven and eight, or some other balance of them. Then maybe adding more dice to the dice pools that you get to choose from. But I don't foresee myself taking it in that direction. I mean, there's not a mechanic in this game right now for god level gameplay. You don't evolve as a hero. There's no level up. I thought about briefly doing that though. I thought about having a level up option, but I don't know that it works with the type of game that I'm working on. It's not a full role play game. Not that you can't make it one. But in order to do that, you would have to add a point-based mechanic. I don't think I'm having one. It's more like if you're competing with other players, it's going to be something like 3 rounds of combat, and the best out of 3 wins, and you move on from there to the next round of gameplay, or the next mission or whatever. That does bring into mind the question, though. If I do something like a mission that's player versus player, I want them to be able to have minimum or at least 3 player versus player mission types and 3 cooperative mission types. Theoretically, I would do a cooperative and a competitive, and I would do 5 of each. And that should be the focus, I think, at that point of the first batch. So if I can break down some of those types of the list of gameplay types and find one that translates especially well to cooperative and competitive, I should be able to build a base set of missions. So King of the Hill style game would be competitive player versus player or team versus team. And a race could be player versus player or team versus team. Cooperative dungeon clear would have to be cooperative. I'm wondering if I could build a if I could come up with one for each of these categories that's usable as either cooperative or competitive. And that's for player versus player. I want the single player option to be available too. And I want to be able to do single player or multiplayer as options for doing like episodic gameplay. So I guess I'll play a short run today, see if I could beat 3 levels, or also allow for a single player to tell a linear storyline through completing missions. It may be tricky to work that out. I got to figure out how I would manage some of that. But I think I've got most of what I need to figure out for gameplay mechanics. I need to, play test some of it and figure out how to tweak it. Like, I'm still not sure what the right number of dice to give everybody to start with is. And some of it's contingent on the fact that defensive dice predominantly all have a feature, a benefit. So your defensive dice are going to give you the ability to block, deflect, dodge, swipe something of use, a utility belt that's kind of a wild card die, and a reroll any dice die. And but the offensive have a attack, ranged attack, power use attack, and then the skull and crossbones are like the 4 faces of that die that are likely to be beneficial to you in combat. The gadget and the regeneration are swipables that your opponent can take from you that round. So you have 4 out of 6 faces on your offensive dice that are useful for what you're doing. And the other 2 are potentially useful to your opponent. So I don't know if that capability, if that mechanism that I'm applying there will make it so that you would necessarily favor a higher number of offensive dice, because at any given time, if you're rolling 6 six-sided dice, statistically speaking, at any given time, one of them is going to be something that doesn't benefit you any and might potentially benefit your opponent. So having 7 means that one of them can be a lost dice every turn, and it doesn't hurt your ability to inflict 6 types of damage. So that's something I'll have to figure out in actual gameplay to see how that works out in the end. And I sort of am not sure if you're when you're at a position where you're playing player versus player, you have in front of you the field of combat. Each roll all of the dice you choose from your pools. So you have a pool of 6 dice for defense and a pool of 6 dice for offense. And say you're only allowed 6 dice total. You pick how many of each set you want. You put them together in your hand and you roll them. And then because a defensive die cancels out an attack die, you sort of compare what you've each rolled, and like their attack die and your defense die of the same type cancel each other out. Then do you work out towards the end where like they've got one more attack than I have defense, so I take a point against me, and at the end of 3 rounds they get whoever has the highest point value wins that round? Or do I set game mechanics up so that oh, that might be kind of hard to do. I was going to say with 2 players rolling, my 1 shield die defeats all of their fist dice. So they have attack and I have block. 1 block die defeats all attack dice. And all dodge dice defeats all ranged dice. So you could roll 3 attack dice. You could roll 3 punches or whatever we want to call them. I have it kerpow, blammo, and zap. But for communication purposes, fist, bullet, and superpower dice are met with block, dodge, and deflect. So if you roll 3 fist dice, I would only need to roll 1 block die to defeat your 3 fist dice. So it makes the most sense for trying to get the widest variety of attacks in your rolls. And it defensively makes more sense to get the most diversity in your defense abilities. So literally, if I rolled 4 defensive dice and I got a block, deflect, dodge, and yoink, or steal a gadget, like I'm pretty much protected from any attacks that you can offer. And any gadget or regeneration ones that you drop, I have the chance to pick up. So rolling 4 defensive dice, maybe even 5 defensive dice, out of a limited number means that I will always I have a greater chance of being protected the higher number of defense dice I roll. And there's a sweet threshold. There's a sweet spot right in the middle where you like, and that's one of the things, like, generally speaking, when I build a game, I build relatively simple systems that allow for gameplay to be the complexity of the game is better put into the story, the artwork, and the dressing of the game. Simple rules, complex flavoring, really is what I would call it. And that's all down to, like, the simpler the rules are, the less risk of making a game that becomes unbalanced and is easily broken. And that's sort of why I had a little bit of trouble with the Ray Gun Gothic board game. Is there's the risk of adding too many layers and overcomplicating the game. And with a dice game, you're bound to be a lot more simple because it's really just down to roll. Now, the risk with a dice game is dice games are a lot more to do with chance. And so adding in an element of strategy and tactics is a little bit harder to do. And that's why, like, I like giving the player the option to decide how many defensive and how many offensive dice are they going to pick for that round. Because, like I said, a good set of 4 to 5 defensive dice has the best chance of giving you all the protection you're going to need from any risky situations. So what you want when you go into any combat situation is a protection against punches, protection against range attacks, protection against superpowers, and a yoink ability, an ability to grab when your opponent ends up dropping a regeneration or a gadget. If you don't have that yoink die, then you can't grab anything they drop. And now the possibility comes up that if you can't grab it during that round, do they get to pick it up? And do they get a gadget or a regen if you don't? From their own rolled. I do think, because it's an offensive die, setting it up so that the person you're attacking gets first dibs is an important mechanic. But I feel like in order to make it so it's not like a deficit to the player who rolled it, they also have to have the ability to benefit from rolling a gadget or a regen die. And the question becomes at a certain point, does the player who's being attacked use up their yoink die for a single regen die on their opponent's side just to make sure they don't get it? So if I did 6 dice for defense and 6 dice for attack to choose from, and set it up so that each hand, each round, you can only pick 6 total dice. And then at the end of a round, all dice used are gone. So you only get to choose from the pool of dice you have in front of you right then. And a regen lets you draw from the... Yeah, I'm thinking this makes a certain amount of sense. There's just a little bit to work out sense-wise, because if I want to make a player versus player game round, a 3-round game, it might make more sense to do a 9 dice set for each defensive and offensive, maybe even 10 dice, just to round up the pool. And you can only use 6 dice total out of 20 dice every round. 3 rounds would use up, if you used 3 from each, so 3 defensive, 3 offensive, and you didn't get them back after you've used them during this combat, you would have a rapidly dwindling pool. So if you used 3 of each, 3 of each, 3 of each, having 10 would give you the possibility that you could do 3, 3, 3, 3, and then your last round, you could choose to do 4 offensive and 2 defensive to see if you could pull off a Hail Mary at the end. So that's a possibility. That makes sense. So 10 dice makes a good deal of sense. Use a die, it's gone for that, for the rest of the rounds during that combat. Rolling a regen and a gadget, your opponent has dibs on them first. If they don't take them, you can take them. But to take them, I would think you would also have to use a yoink on your own. I think that's fair. Because otherwise you're going to have... Oh, using up a yoink. If you don't use a yoink... Okay, so if you use... Yeah, I'm brainstorming out loud here, and I'm sure that your half of this conversation is probably feeling lost. So what I'm thinking of is, if in a round of combat, I roll 3 blocks as defensives, and I survive that round by using 1 block to block all of your fist or attack die, I still have 2 block dice that I get to keep for round 2. So they don't go into the used pile, the discard pile. So that can affect, this is why I need to sort of play test it a little bit to get a sense of like whether it's entirely possible at that point that 6 dice, if you roll multiples, and like you will never need multiple defense die of the same type. One will defeat all of the corresponding attacks. So redundancies on that point mean that you don't lose those dice for the next round. You'll only lose one. All right, that's a possibility. I really have to, do a rough playthrough to get a sense for what makes the most sense there. And I've got to build the storyline up around the game. So, like, what's the world? How are things the way they are? Why are they that way? Who are the main big characters and the big forces at play? What's the nature of the missions? Who are the characters and their backstories? So I got to generate 8 characters, at least 10 missions, and world backstory, and sort of get a feel for how the dice will work in gameplay. Like, I understand the role they play. The questions I have now are, what's the right number, and how do they play against each other? And I'm using a model of player versus player as the biggest indicator of this. Because what I think I'm probably going to do is, if you're doing a cooperative, like a team-based gameplay, I will have to test the mechanics out on that too. Where what I'm thinking I'm going to do is, say, you and I were sitting down. We each have our set of dice, and we turn over a mission card. And on that mission card, as a cooperative mission, it indicates that we're going to have to defeat, say, 5 goons, and then confront the goon master. And to defeat each goon, we have to, between the two of us, use our defense and attack dice in a way that, like, basically on the card it'll have for each goon that they have 2 or 3 dice that they roll, and it'll have what their rolls are. I feel like for fictional characters like goons and goon masters, it may benefit to have three set dice, and then for goons, like, an additional rolled die, and for goon masters, an additional rolled 3 dice, so that a goon master is going to be like playing against another player, but a goon is going to be easier to beat, and it gives you the possibility, when you're playing as a team of 2 or 3 people, that between your batches of dice, you can use up in multiple rounds all of your dice to finish off the goon master. You'll go through your whole set of 12 dice. So if you have 4 or 5 goons, you have what I say, like 4 dice for each goon. That's 20 dice for just the goons, and then 6 dice for the Goon Master. So 26. If you have 12 and your partner has 12, it gives you the benefit of maybe making it through that game. And if you're not using defense dice that are rolled in duplicates, your dice will last longer. But I do have to figure out if on a Goon's chart or a Goon Master's chart, they have, say, a block, and of the extra die to 3 dice that they roll, they get a second block. Maybe that's, one of their blocks will block all of one player's attacks. But a second block is needed to defeat a second player's attacks. So I gotta sort of write some of these down and figure out the specifics of them so that I can do some play test on that and get a sense for, does it work, and if it needs any tweak to make it more reasonable. And we're about 51 minutes into the night, so I think right now what I need to go do is start plotting out characters and mission types. And when I have a better sense of mission types, I'll get a better sense of how I want to run goons and goon lords, or goon masters, or whatever I want to call them. Because, I mean, it's fairly easy to set it up so instead you have goons are always going to be 4 dice, and goon masters are always going to be 5 or 6 dice. And if you set it up that way for a 2-player game, it makes more sense to only have 4 goons and 1 goon master for the chance of being able to defeat them. But I don't know if I have to make sure that we have a certain level of challenge to it, because I think it would be stupid to do a level of gameplay where you have a 2-player team has 0 chance of losing. You know what I mean? So got to plan it about right. So I think that 5 goons and 1 goon master for 2 players so basically 25 dice for a level, a mission, when 2-player cooperative has a max number of dice of 12 per player, means that there's always that risk that you won't beat that level. But that's theoretical. The mechanic of having multiple defense die be redundant may skew that. So I'll have to think about that rule. All right, so 55 minutes into the night, I think I'm going to call it here and just do some a little more contemplating on it tonight and see what I can figure out. Take care and have a good night, I guess. And there we go.